As an introduction, let me talk about financial markets and their general role in the economy. To start with, I would like to reckon the basic production factors in market economy, which you know for sure. In order to produce something, we need at least three important things, namely labor, land, and capital. Each of those production factors has its own market, separate from the others, and the pricing for these three factors is affected by different factors. In our course, we will focus on the market of capital resources, which is often referred to as a financial market. The financial market is the place where at least three groups of market agents or participants meet. They are individuals, also known as households, companies, also known as corporates, and the governments, also known as states. They can act either directly, using their own name and on their own behalf, or by using various types of financial intermediaries, including banks, pension funds, insurance companies, trust managers, and others. In our course, we will study those intermediaries in detail. What are the 6 key roles of the financial markets? First of all, one of the most important roles is to facilitate savings by businesses and households. We know that households are those who tend to save more than they spend, thus acting as net lenders to the market. And of course, as they have some funds, they can be interested in multiplying their value by investing in various types of financial instruments. The same can be done by the companies who, for some reason, have some free financial resources to spare, even though investing at the financial market may not be their primary economic activity. They can be still interested in storing money and earning some additional interest. On the other hand, the companies and the governments can be interested in attracting financing from the market because, in general, those groups of market agents tend to be net spenders of financial resources. So they can issue various types of financial instruments to attract the funds they need. From the macroeconomic point of view, one of the most important functions of financial markets is perfect asset allocation. Because if the pricing at the financial market is free and open, then the capital is allocated to where the risk-adjusted rate of return is the highest. This can be also hold the famous invisible hand of the market, which helps us allocate financial resources in the most efficient way. Another role of a financial market can be facilitating the final exchange of goods and services. And here I would like to highlight the market for foreign exchange, which always acts as the intermediary if we need to make transactions at the different markets before we pay. We need to exchange our national currency into the foreign currency. It could be rather difficult without open and liquid the market for foreign exchange. Another important thing which I would like to put forward is that all the market agents, including businesses, individuals, and the governments, may be interested in protecting against unfavorable price changes. In this case, they can be trading various types of financial derivatives such as futures or options to ensure against the pricing volatility, which is another important function of financial markets. Last, but definitely not least, is that companies may use open and liquid financial markets in order to finance their capital investment by issuing equity securities and expand their business activity. Of course, this list is not full and we can mention other rules of financial markets, but let's call it a day. Now it's time to make a clear definition of what financial market is. In general, we can define the financial market as the marketplace for securities and other financial instruments. In this case, in general, it can be no difference between the markets for financial instruments and the markets for traditional goods and services. However, I believe that it does not explain the full concept, because unlike traditional goods and services, financial instruments are not used for consumption. That's why I believe that it's more correct to identify financial markets as the set of economic relations based on asset allocation and risk distribution. Because we need to remember that any kind of financial instrument is money packaged with risks. And it's not only the capital which is traded at the market, but the associated risks as well. Depending on what we're looking for in the markets, we can distinguish between money market and the capital market. In general, the formal criterion is the duration of the financial instruments traded. Money market is generally referred to as the market for short-term instruments maturing in less than 1 year, while capital markets are the markets for medium-term and long-term financial instruments. So what makes the difference? The main difference is what we are actually borrowing. For example, the company which has some accounts receivables, like sales revenue in 1 month, may have the liability to pay salaries in 1 week. And in this case, it needs money to finance this gap. Of course, there is nothing else than money that the company should attract from the market. However, on the other side, the company may get engaged in some long-term investment activity and it may need money for several years in order to do some construction and expand its business. In this case, it's not simply the money that the company is attracting from the market, because here the money is attracted for capital needs. That's why we can say that by attracting funds for longer terms, the company is attracting capital as the factor of production, which is likely to make some additional value, which is likely to increase in value. So this is the main criterion which makes the difference between money markets and financial markets from the economic point of view. We can classify financial markets by the place and the trading technology. Of course, there are no burdens to trade various types of financial instruments directly. This is the example of unorganized or spontaneous, also known as the street market. This is the market for bilateral transactions where buyers and sellers communicate on their own behalf without the use of any intermediaries. However, this is not the most efficient way how the markets are organized. That's why exchanges and various OTC trading platforms are of higher importance and of higher popularity at the market, which are the forms of the organized market. The main difference between exchanges and over-the-counter markets is that exchanges are responsible for the full cycle of a financial transaction, including post-trades like clearing and settlement, while OTC trading systems are generally engaged when making the trade, but not doing the post-trade. If we break down the financial markets by the theory covered, we can distinguish between regional, national, international markets and the global markets. We will talk mostly about national markets and international markets as well. Just as we have mentioned international financial markets, let's look into developed and emerging markets, which is another important definition we'll be talking about. Here is the list of the developed markets introduced by the Standard & Poor's. There are some other classifications provided by Dow Jones, FTSE, Russell and others, but in general, there is very little difference. Those markets in those countries are known as developed, while all the rest are generally referred to as emerging markets. So, what makes developed markets developed? First of all, developed markets refer to high-income economies. And the income can be measured, for example, like the gross national income per capita calculated by the World Bank. Another attribute of a developed market is the regulatory authority, which actively monitors the market and has a long history of market regulation. Another thing is that the rights of minority shareholders must be protected in such markets along with the rights of the majorities. And there should be no restriction for foreign ownership of the national companies, and the foreign investors should have no significant burdens to enter these markets, as well as those who wish to repatriate the capital should not face any objections or significant restrictions.